Hello and welcome to Macstaff Live. You're very welcome with us today, wherever you're watching us, whether that be LinkedIn or on YouTube. Thanks a lot for joining us. Today we've got a hard-hitting political debate ahead of us, and I'm joined by three heavy hitters of the recruitment industry. Whether your own political leanings are red, blue, yellow, green, or somewhere in between, I think I can guarantee you plenty of colour coming up from this debate. I'm joined as ever by MD of Macstaff, Anthony McCormack, who's smiling at my big intro there. Welcome. And we are also joined by Mark Hopkins. Sarah Bishop's due to join us any second now. She's just booting up. But Anne, I'll let you hand over to you for a better intro for both Mark and Sarah when she arrives.
Yes, I'm really grateful for Mark and subsequently Sarah joining. Just quick intros because you want the meat, I suppose, don't you? But Mark Hopkins, Thomas Lee Recruitment, so fellow kind of technical engineering specialist. He runs that agency, and more importantly, he's the creator and master of the Markverse as well, where many men live. And so that's where I kind of cottoned on to him on social. So thanks for joining us, mate.
No worries. No worries.
Sarah Bishop, she's the founder of Recruit that's into recruitment, HR training and coaching. She's a force of nature, so you've probably seen her around as well, and she'll probably just appear in a puff of smoke in a minute.
Okay, great stuff. Mark, thanks for joining us. You're really welcome today. So we'll crack on and we'll wait for Sarah to appear. And I think let's start with you, Mark. Whatever happens in this general election that we've got coming up in a couple of weeks' time,
yeah,
I guess do we all agree that this is a real critical juncture for the country and its economy after the way things have seemingly stalled on lots of fronts since COVID came and went?
I think so. I think the next 5 years, I mean, Sunak keeps saying it in all his information that he puts out there, the next 5 years in the UK is definitely a critical time. What I think needs to be added to that, there's a lot of things that's happened in the last 10 years that we need to start addressing for the next 5 years. And I think the country's starting to realise now that maybe the Conservatives are not the party that's going to be able to deliver that into the future. Typically, my background, I'm from West Wales. As you can imagine, being a Welsh person, I'm not into the Tories that much. But I've been a very... but I mean, look, I do talk a lot about politics, and especially with friends and family, but on Facebook and a few other people with businesses as well I deal with. My views have always been pretty centralist, centre-left mostly, but centralist in that way. And for the last 14 years, if you remember Chuka Umair and a few other people created that party during the whole Brexit debate. I thought, there's something happening now in the centre ground. And I've been politically homeless for quite some time. And I think what we're starting to see now is to really stabilise the ship of the HMS UK. The centre ground needs to be occupied now. And I think this is where you're starting to hear people say that Keir Starmer is become a bit more centralist and typical Tory politics in the past have been more centre-right. So I think that's what's going on at the moment, that we need to kind of toe that kind of line and go in that direction. I don't think extremism or populism is the future now for the UK. So this election...
Because the country needs stability, Mark. You say that because you're seeking stability for the country.
100%. 100%. Everyone's seeking stability. You look at the last 3 years since Liz Truss's budget, we came out of an unstable time of COVID. Admittedly, layered in there as well was Brexit, which we're now discovering at the moment it's just not the right thing that's happened. Maybe there's a better deal to be had, or maybe there's a rollback solution. I don't know yet. I don't know what that kind of answer is. But we've had 5 years, three to 5 years of mass instability in this country. Not to forget that since 2016 to 2019, there was a little bit of instability in the economy as well because of Brexit. And we've had a very lame economy in that time as well, definitely since 2010 when austerity was introduced. So we are seeking stability. Business leaders I speak to have all said to me the last 14 years has been such a roller coaster ride of ups and downs. They don't recognize the market as they used to prior to 2010, to the last financial crash.
Yeah. Anthony, agree with any of the points that Mark made there, and agreeing that this is a very, very important time for the economy?
Yeah, definitely a key time, and I think it's the Lib Dems that say it's like nothing's working. Like it's there's been growth and contraction of the economy, but like I suppose overall the theme is like nobody seems to be better off. So I don't know how it happened in a way over the, if you say 50 years, whereby like a one blue collar guy used to be able to take care of his whole family, like have a decent house, like wife didn't work and so on. So not looking to necessarily return to those days, but it's like chalk and cheese, isn't it? So in terms of where we're at economy, and like we're sensitive to it in recruitment anyway, with the ups and downs. Like there was a bit of a sugar rush after COVID. Actually, it didn't kill it all off after the pandemic. Actually, I think we had like one, maybe two kind of good years in there, but then inflation, which obviously the current government blame external factors, that the energy prices, war in Ukraine, and so on. We've had to put up interest rates, and that's kind of really put the brakes on the economy. It's like both sides of our client base are against the wall for money. It's like candidates, are desperate to get more salary. Like clients can't pay it because they're being squeezed on their margins as well. So it's been really difficult, and there's a downturn, but is it the new normal? That's the concern, like putting caution into the market as well, or is it a temporary thing that we're going to come back out of? But people feel like it's time for a change, isn't it? We're probably going to come on to it, but writing's on the wall, like and I'm open to the change. Like I'm a traditional, I guess, Tory voter, but I'm embarrassed, as to just the situation that the country's in, but just the political behaviour, of revolving door of prime ministers and everything like that. So maybe it's a new chapter.
Anthony, where do you think it went wrong for the Tory party?
It feels like it went wrong, like with all the infighting, like after Boris won his landslide 2019, because that was like a full like country mandate, wasn't it? And maybe it was false promises, but he kind of loaned that vote, didn't he, from the Red Wall, and like got more northern like voters and things like that. And we seem to be on the right track, but like the party kind of killed him off, and then obviously the Liz Truss mini budget and Sunak and everything, it's just gone really downhill. But I suppose there must have been some systemically wrong things apart from Partygate, was there? Or?
I think there was a lot of deep systemic problems within the Tory party a lot longer than Boris Johnson got into power. And I think that started pretty much when Cameron announced the referendum, and it exposed quite a lot of problems internally with them. The different silos within the Tory party. Hello.
We'll just pop you off there, Mark, just for 1 second, because I just see Sarah's with us. Welcome, Sarah. Can you hear us okay?
Hello, yes I can. Sorry about that. Bit of a technical issue. One problem with van life, isn't it? Trying to get a sufficient signal.
That's your new mobile all around Europe office, isn't it? Approved by the tax man. Good to see you.
It seems like Sarah's on a several-second delay, folks. So what I'm going to do is ask Sarah.
It is, it is indeed.
Maybe a 10-second delay. I'm just going to ask Sarah now while she's on. You've just joined us, Sarah, while we've just been discussing the fact that whatever happens in this general election, the country and the economy is at a critical juncture. Do you agree with the points that have been made so far that this is a very, very important moment for the country, whichever way it turns out in a few weeks' time? Silence.
I think so, massively. I don't think anybody, regardless of political persuasion, can argue that the country's probably certainly one of the shittiest states that I've ever seen it. So, so I think something drastic needs to happen, and whoever gets in, I think there's going to be a little bit of a poison chalice for a while. So I don't think there's any massive quick fixes that we can effect straight away. I think it's like, you know, when you're talking about cultural change in a business, you know, a lot of us work in the recruitment industry. It's a thing that takes time, doesn't it? It's not going to happen overnight. We need some things change quickly, but the things we really need changing quickly aren't quick jobs. So I think it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it?
That's a really good point, actually, Sarah, and one that sort of takes me on to the next point I wanted to make. So we'll head back over to Mark here. If all the polls are correct, Mark, and as suggested, brings about a Labour victory, what do you expect to change in the coming months, years, and how quickly can that change be effected?
I think, as Sarah just said, it's a poison chalice to take on running this country. What I'm hearing at the moment from people like Rachel Reeves and a few other Labour members, there's going to be a gradual kind of change that's going to happen. It's not going to shock the system. We saw what happened when you shock a system a couple of years ago with Liz Truss. This is how delicate we're in such a kind of position now as a country. This is how delicate everything is. The economy, the cost of living, interest rates. I mean, people can say that there's a conspiracy behind all of that, but we really are where we are. And the only way we can get out of this is the country to make more money. And then that way, then you can lower taxes, you can do all those nice things to happen. But we're going to still have high taxes for a little longer. There's going to be areas of the economy that, with the broader shoulders, is going to have taxes implemented on them, which I think Labour's already announced. Things like tuition fees, VAT and tuition fees. But we're going to see a gradual change. Wes Streeting was on the radio this morning talking about week one, he's going to be speaking to NHS dentists and trying to renegotiate the contract. And he was asked, how long is that going to take? And he goes, I don't know, because I don't want to make a rod for my own back. And this is the problem that they're now inheriting, is that there's a lot of systemic problems. Another one is RAC in schools. How many schools are in such dire problems at this moment in time, and how much is that going to cost? And then we got renters reform. We've got all these little things. They can't happen overnight. We need to be patient with it. So I think for the first 12 months, we're going to see some changes, but we're not going to see massive changes. I think the bigger changes are going to be later on in this term, after year 3, maybe year 4. But Labour have said they need 10 years to root out the systemic issues that have implemented against us in the last 14 years.
Yeah. Anthony, has the country got 3 or 4 years to wait, or will people be so impatient that they demand change sooner if it can be achieved?
Yeah, well, I think...
Assuming the Labour victory, of course, again.
Yeah, people are demanding the change, aren't they? And that'll probably start with a Labour victory. I think it's fair to say, likely a majority, potentially a landslide, I think, by the looks of it. And, I'm resigned to that. I think it is good, to give them a chance now. And, they can turn that new page that they've been talking about in the election kind of materials and things like that. I'm kind of less apprehensive about it than normal, because if I was being inflammatory, Keir Starmer's a Tory, anyway, it's like 1997, Tony Blair all over again. With they say, oh, you can't put a cigarette paper between the policies, so it might be the best of both worlds for me. So I'm hopeful.
Sarah, I'll just go on to you there. Firstly, I'm desperate to get your response to Ant calling Keir Starmer a Tory, because I think I've pushed that in the right direction, your direction. And secondly, if things don't go as the polls and everyone expects, and the Tories, the Lib Dems, the Greens, Reform all take part of that vote, and we're led with a hung parliament, how much damage could that do to the country, if any, in slowing down the progress we all want to make?
I think one of the first things is, I think we need to be very careful about assuming that there's going to be a Labour victory or a landslide victory, because that was one of the things that I didn't anticipate with the Brexit referendum, and sat there for the rest of probably since it happened going, what the fuck? So that's the first thing, is we probably shouldn't assume it. I think the second thing is that Keir Starmer, yeah, he is pretty, you know, I would say he's probably the ilk of Tory that I used to vote for, because I need to get that out there, because lots of people think I'm just some woolly lesbian lefty who's like, you know, writes poetry to my vagina and has voted Labour all my life, whereas the reality is I actually haven't ever voted Labour, and only really started to realise I'm kind of politically homeless, as I actually think a lot of people in the UK are. So yeah. I think that, and I know I'm going a little bit off-piste, but I don't think you'd expect anything different from me, which for me again reinforces that we need things like proportional representation. We're a country that traditionally have been very, very proud of the fact that we have this democracy, and largely I find that the people that shout loudest about these terrific traditions and democracy actually aren't the people who are shouting for things like proportional representation and making our system more democratic, because 80% of the planet has a more democratic system than we do. And I think we need to come into line with that, which does also bring into the potential of a hung parliament. So as I know you guys are probably aware, and some of your listeners may be aware, I am actually a resident in Vienna in Austria for large parts of the year, because my wife's Austrian. So it's been a big eye-opener to me over the last 5 years, being immersed into what has traditionally over the decades been a largely social democratic or democratic socialist governments, very democratic socialist leanings. And, you know, you're walking around in a beautiful city where public transport's cheap, everything works, everything's clean. You know, there's the equality gap is much, much smaller than in the UK, all these sorts of things. So it was a big eye opener. It made me look a lot more at empirical and data-driven evidence, and it blew away a lot of my leanings and made me feel incredibly ashamed for a long time, or not necessarily ashamed, but quite angry that my voting history had gone a certain way in some areas. So the hung parliament thing, they come very close to having hung parliaments and coalitions on a fairly regular basis where they have proportional representation. And for me, I don't think it's actually a bad thing. I think it encourages people, if you know that that's going to happen over the long term, is likely to happen quite often. I think it brings together people where you have to learn a way to cooperate. And therefore you can do more long-term planning. So you haven't got this pendulum swing that we have. So people on this side of politics come in, they undo all the stuff that other people have done and they bring theirs in, and then 5 years later or 15 years later, it goes round and round, which is really bloody expensive for us.
Yes.
For the taxpayers. It costs the country a lot of money. So I think that if we have something like that, the other thing that I think you've got, when we had a coalition previously, I think it was largely built up with people going, let's just fuck everything up and blame it on the other ones. Because there wasn't an awful lot of cooperation going on there, was there? So I'm hoping that there is a landslide. I don't think that the current Tory party is anything near what I think of good old-fashioned traditional Tory values. You know, quite frankly, I think they're a bunch of incompetent intellectual pygmies who are serving self and party first and before the country, and that's not what they're paid to do.
Always lovely to have Sarah on the show, because she's always sitting on the fence. I wish she would say what she means at times, but thanks for that, Sarah. Just a good quick point for me: if you're watching us on LinkedIn or YouTube today, and you do have any questions during the show, please stick them on the comments section, and we'll do our best to try and get to them at the end if any pop up. But let's go specifically back to recruitment, your guys' industries for the time being. I'll start with you, Anthony. Do you how could let's say it's a Labour victory, how could that affect your job on a day-to-day basis? What things do you expect to be different under a new regime, and what things are you sort of sitting there crying out for to change?
Yeah, well, I think it's almost the economic stuff rather than the political stuff that's most important. We just literally track the growth or shrinking of GDP, like all the size of the economy in recruitment. If it's growing, it's good news. If it's not, it's bad news. we tend to be a barometer. The good news comes into recruitment before it even hits the official stats, like a few months later in terms of jobs filled and things like that. So we're hoping for some stability, a platform for growth, and both Labour and Conservative would certainly be saying that they want to do that, and they're going to do that. Traditionally, using the inflammatory language, like people are concerned in business about Labour because they're beholden to the paymasters at the unions and things like that, and they're anti-agency. But the REC, the Recruitment and Employment Confederation, have been in close talks with the Labour Party, and they're assuring us that there's a good dialogue going on, and that it's not necessarily that they'll be totally anti-zero things. It's things like 0-hour contracts they don't like. They're protecting people from having to be temporary workers, when I think in the recruitment industry would promote the fact that a lot of people like flexible working, gig economy. The traditional 9-to-5 working population isn't necessarily what's driving the economy these days. So there is some concerns over what a new Labour government will look like, but I think that they are talking to business, and that we're hopefully all roughly on the same side.
Mark, same question to you, and do you agree? And what are your views there on the point Ant touched on about is this Labour Party still at the behest of the unions to a great extent, or is it a new Labour Party that's taking a helm?
What I'm hearing is a couple of the unions are not quite happy with some of the parts of the manifesto that Labour's going to be producing this week, which tells me that Labour's not scared of ruffling their feathers a little bit. I think they're going to try to lean in on business, because that's the only way to grow the GDP. The unions, when it came to the Brexit debate, were pro-Brexit because there was stuff that the unions could do to change the working conditions of the UK without the EU without working time regulations and all the other stuff the EU brought in for us. So I think Labour's not scared of the unions. However, they need the unions to bring on board voters. So they have to say a few things to kind of put in there. For me, what I'm hoping that they're not too scared to say, right, we need to start reversing some of the problematic issues we have in society, like a bit of Brexit. Maybe we need to go into the single market. That should help grow GDP. And especially from my perspective in the manufacturing industry, we need something like that, especially when it comes to freedom of movement of people. We need more staff. This is why we're struggling for people in the UK. The one part of it that just always comes to my mind every time is things like IR35, and I can't find anything on that at this moment in time from any of the parties, because that has actually had a detrimental impact to the contracting side of things in the engineering manufacturing world. So yeah, it's a difficult one to say. Are they behest to the unions? I don't think they are, but I think they need the unions at the same time. So they're in quite a difficult stranglehold at the moment with it.
Yeah. So how could any result affect the way you operate your business? And what things over the last 5 years have you been sitting down thinking, for God's sake, I just wish they'd do this to help us out?
Well, rejoin the European Single Union. Yeah. Reverse Brexit. Where should I start? I just agree with all the points that you've made there, because I think really for us as smaller businesses who are so reliant on other businesses, we're in that food chain, in that supply chain. So really we need to look at it from a holistic point of view. At the end of the day, look, we all know, a lot of us, none of us are, we're all fairly jaded recruiters, aren't we? You can see the grey in all of our hair. None of us are spring chickens. So we've all been there. We've all weathered a variety of recessions, haven't we? And we all know that there will always be somebody who's doing okay during a recession. I think it was quite famously, I don't know if this is apocryphal, but wasn't Prime Time started during a recession, and the guys who started it, everyone kept saying to them, this is a really bad time to go it alone, this is a really bad time to go it alone, and they kept saying it's a prime time because we can get cheap offices, it's a prime time because loads of recruiters are being laid off, it's the prime time. And apparently that's how they came up with the name. So Probably somebody just told me that, pissed up in a bar one time, and I believed it. But anyway, it's a great story. So we all know that there will be somebody that does okay. So there was always ways as recruiters to find areas that are going to work. But it's not ideal. You know, we like it when there's a buoyant market, more people are in employment. It's better for everybody. It's better for local economies. And I think one of the things that data globally shows is that GDP and growth, economic growth especially, is driven very much by smaller businesses. And small businesses make up the majority of the businesses, you know, in the UK. So there needs to be support for businesses. One of the things that I've changed my mind on dramatically over the years, and like I say, this is since my Austria years, shall we say, is I was very bought into that kind of, you know, low taxation, encourage commerce, encourage people in, create jobs, and that trickle down economics. And it's a myth. I mean, there's study after study after study which has proven that it's a myth. Low taxation environments only benefit the incredibly wealthy. It doesn't create any more jobs. So what we need to be doing is we need to be, I'm pretty sure everybody I meet, and they're not all freaks and weirdos. I mean, a lot of my very dearest friends are, because I love the freaks and weirdos, because they're my people. But nearly everybody I meet says that they wouldn't mind paying a bit more tax if everything worked. You know, if you could get a doctor's appointment. And coming back to Mark's point as well about, you know, we do need freedom of movement. We do need people. The whole of Europe is competing for medical staff, for general workers, like across all sectors. And the very sad thing that I found, and this was demonstrated really, really by a recruiter I was dealing with in the medical profession a couple of years ago, we could reinstate freedom of movement. We could sort out immigration. We could sort out these amazing visas. And people don't want to come here now. We've made our island a very unwelcoming place. So the guys who were running the medical thing, who had relied on international doctors and nurses for years and years, had decades worth of data where they used to have a survey used to go out because they recruited internationally. All the, you know, on their application form, the country that you most want to work in, and they said consistently for like ever it was like the UK, the UK, the UK, and now we're way below places like Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, because people don't think that we're inviting and welcoming to strangers anymore. And to be quite frank, if all you did was watch our news and read our media outlets, you'd be inclined to think so. And in some pockets of the area, it's bloody true.
Yeah.
Mark, a legacy of the last 10 years?
Oh, say that again. Sorry, you dipped out there.
The things Sarah's just pointed out there, is that a damning legacy of the last 10 years?
Oh, 100% is a damning legacy of the last 10 years. I think I couldn't even see the plan and where it was going, if I'm honest with you, for the last 10 years. It was always about this narrative of get Brexit done and the oven baked deal and all that kind of stuff. But there wasn't a moment where they stopped and said, how is that going to impact business? Because there's a lot of directed towards Project Fear. This will decrease GDP. Goldman Sachs quite recently said GDP has been affected by 5%. That's a huge chunk of revenue off the books that we're missing because of this weird kind of world that we're in now because of Brexit. Okay, given there are some little issues like the war in Ukraine and a few other bits and bobs around the world which are causing some problems, but we are missing a massive chunk because we've had 10 years of what I like to call Tory psychodrama. And that's what it's been basically, and this push and pull. And the general public don't know where to go with it. They don't know who to believe anymore. And that's why we're hearing people saying Keir Starmer's the same as the Tories. He may be, he may not be. But I think the direction we need to go now is we've tried this. We need to now try to solve this and then move away from it as quickly as possible. And bring people with us as well. So it's not a war anymore. And it's not Remainers against Brexiteers anymore. It's let's educate as many of the masses as we can to say this was wrong and this is why, and we're going to try to do something about it along the way so that we don't have this psychodrama again.
Yeah, fascinating points. And as a person with conservative leanings, 2 points. Do you hear what Sarah and Mark are saying? And secondly, if you are a strong Conservative with Conservative roots, what do you want to see from that party over the next couple of years?
Yeah, definitely, I agree, and I think it's brilliant to kind of bring open-minded people, like intelligent, have a good debate. So yeah, like it has been disappointing, the results of the the Conservative 14 years or whatever, and if you're going to stay honest and intellectually honest and open-minded, you have to recognize and look for new information, change your mind, things like that, don't you? It was kind of this book, I think, that drove me to kind of reacquaint with Bish before, of how the Scandinavians got it right and how we can too. So I quite like the look of some of this social democracy, or what's the phrase again, sorry, Sarah?
Democratic socialism. I keep getting it round the wrong way as well.
Yeah, I like the look of that, and I'm a fan of proportional representation, because like most people are unrepresented when, as Sarah said, you've got this pendulum swing, like whereas most people's votes don't even count anyway. My constituency is Rees Moggs, by the way.
Oh my God!
Around
you
here,
couldn't be any more conservative.
I think, like in the rural area that I'm at, I thought I'd fess up to that. What is, does my vote even matter anyway, really? But so where we are now compared to, how do we do the path though to from where we are now to where we want to get to? Like, do we all vote for the Liberal Democrats? Because they're a proportional representation party. So are Remain as well, like for different ideological reasons. But I just don't know what to think. I'm just really glad to hear everybody's opinions, and I'm going to soak up as many as I can before the election and try and get some enthusiasm back, for politics in general, because I'm jaded and disappointed about the whole thing. It's been a circus.
Can I just jump in there and just say how it's going to start? Let's pretend Labour do win with a massive majority. The second biggest party isn't going to have many MPs, believe it or not. So the second biggest vote is going to be Reform. And that will be a cascade, in a good way, the only good way, of people pushing pressure on the people in power then to go down the PR route. Because the first past the post system, we're one of two countries in the world that has it. The other country is Belarus, which is, not the bedfellows you want to have, really. So we need to be a lot more progressive in the way we do vote our parliaments. And I think that's what one thing Reform are going to do to this country, is put the pressure on proportional representation for their own voters more than anything. But Lib Dems are going to agree with them. The Greens are definitely going to agree with them. Plaid Cymru, SNP, they're all going to agree with it. I'll put a lot of pressure on Labour. And I think people within the Labour Party want it as well. You might be looking at 50, 60% of the parliamentary party that might push for it in the next 5 years. Will they win it in the next 5? Will they get it in the next 5 years? I don't know. I think there'll definitely be a referendum, that famous word, on it in the next 6 years. So by the 10 years' time, hopefully in our lifetime, I think it will happen. The only problem is, and if you listen to some people like Jeremy Corbyn and people like that about proportional representation, and he's only just warmed to it, he hasn't actually liked it. There are different versions of it, and that debate needs to happen. And I think that's why it's going to take a while for it to actually happen. But there are models. You look at Germany's model. You look at some of the French model. I'm not too afraid with the Austrian model, but I think they've got a similar to the Germans.
Very
as
similar,
well. Yeah. So
and
there is
not without issues. I mean, we had elections 2 days ago, and the bloody far right have won the majority, which is very unusual. But it's just the way it's the way things are going. Luckily, because we've got PR, it is tempered largely by the Greens. Still have got quite a good showing. So
And that's the great thing about the PR system. It's a very balanced, a snapshot of the country at the polls at that moment in time. Whereas in the last general election in 2019, with Boris Johnson making it about Brexit, the Tories got 43% of the vote and won a majority in the House, whereas 58, 57% of the country voted against the Tories and Brexit and what they represented. So that balance is totally out within our parliamentary system. So yeah, that needs to be addressed, and the House of Lords as well, but that's a different story.
Yeah, let's keep it House of Commons for the time being.
Yeah.
We've already gone over half an hour, folks, so I'm going to slowly start wrapping things up. But before I do go, I want you to get your crystal balls out, put you on the spot, and tell me what the result's going to be, and then also tell me where the country's going to be 4 or 5 years down the line. And we'll start with Bish.
Oh God, right, that's a difficult one. I do think it's going to be a big majority for Labour. I'm not sure it's going to be as massive a landslide as some people are predicting. And I think, Mark, you're probably right. I think the ones that aren't going to go are going to go to Reform. I think that there's going to be quite divisive. I'm quite happy if they divide the vote, actually. It'd be, for me, be a tactical thing. Where is the country going to be in the next 4 or 5 years? Well, hopefully in a better situation than it is now. So the last Labour administration was 97 to 2010, wasn't it? So I was largely employed. I started my business in 2009 at the tail end of the recession, and remembering back, I paid less tax and I got on the housing ladder and I did all these things, so I certainly was probably not necessarily better off, but in comparison. So I'm hoping that some strides can have been made to not just improving our economy, but also improving our infrastructure, reducing the inequality gap, because that has a massive knock-on effect to all the things that piss people off. It has a massive knock-on effect to crime, particularly violent crime. It has a massive knock-on effect to education. All of these things that matter to people, to use of the NHS even. So I like to see that being tackled. I'm not sure whether we're in such a hole at the moment. I'm not sure how big a difference you can effect in 4 to 5 years, but I hope it is significant because we need it.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. That's a good point, and a good point to reiterate one of the points you made earlier, Mark. So we'll go over to you now about that. Is 4 or 5 years enough to make a change? But let's stick with the plan and give us your result first, and then tell us what you expect to happen.
So I think, very similar to Sarah, I think the Labour Party are going to win. I think it's going to be very similar to where the Tories are now. I don't think it's going to be a massive landslide, although the polls are showing it. I think we're going to have a nice little shock when it comes to the Lib Dems. I think they're going to gain quite a fair few more seats than they need to. If the polls are anything to be shown, the Tories are heading towards a Canada Tory party style destruction, completely wiped out. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to have still about 100 people. I think Reform are going to have 1, maybe 2. And this is my prediction. What's going to happen? One of those guys is going to be Nigel Farage, and he's going to defect to the Tory party, and he's going to run for their leader. That's one of my predictions.
Oh, that is a soundbite which I should be clipping afterwards.
Yeah. That's my prediction.
Wouldn't be surprised.
And the reason I think it's always been on the cards. You listen to the Tory party in the last couple of months talking about, we'd love to have Nigel on board because he's a populist. They lost the last populist, Johnson, and they need another populist. It's the only way they can survive now into the future. What's the country going to look like in the next 5 years? I think we're going to see stability come back. I think we're going to be very bored. We're not going to have much to talk about because the right-wing press will probably try to create something, but things are just going to be stable. We're going to see things come down. We're going to see mortgage rates come down. We're going to see GDP slowly grow. Nothing massive, 1% maybe next year, maybe 1.5% next year. But we're going to see stability. And that's the important thing we're going to see. After about 2 or 3 years of stability, confidence will come back. And I think we're going to start hearing, and I'm just listening to the Labour Party talk about things at the moment. There's a little gap in their budget, and they're dependent upon GDP to grow to fill that gap. And you and I both know the only way to do that is single market. And I think that's on the cards in the next 5 years as well.
Wow. And are you prepared to be bored over the next 4 or 5 years? Will you be happy with being bored?
I'd kind of take that for a change, I suppose, after the...
Wouldn't we all?
So I think, good Labour majority, like potentially the landslide. I think that seems to be on the cards. maybe Reform will do well. I think that they'd be a more effective opposition, if anything, than the Tories. It might be by accident, I suppose, then. But yeah, if we get kind of snowball of support for proportional representation, I think that's right. That's true democracy. I've been starting to want more kind of social justice with my capitalism, and increasingly uncomfortable with the divide between rich and poor and things like that, and unhappy that the public systems are broken and things like that. So maybe I'll get what I wish for. We just need the growth of the economy, as these guys are rightly saying, to pay for it. So that starts with stability and hopefully goes from there. I mean, it might be that the economy's kind of ready for an upswing anyway, and was it a rising tide lifts all boats? So like Labour might get to claim that they did the big turnaround when it was happening anyway. I don't know. It's really difficult to tell.
A good point to finish on. Thanks for that, and thanks for your time, everybody. It's been a real pleasure today to listen to all your opinions, fascinating as they are. We should do it again sometime, actually. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us from the mobile. Tell everyone where they can get hold of you if you're interested in finding out more about Recruit.
Okay, it's very simple. It's Sarah at recruitrecruit.co.uk, and the website is also recruitrecruit.co.uk.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot for joining us. Mark, thank you for joining us as well. Tell people where they can get hold of you.
By the neck, mostly. No. Just find me on LinkedIn. Mark Hopkins, Thomas Lee Recruitment. Find me on LinkedIn, connect. All my details are on there. You can get hold of me, and try not to call me because I don't answer. I'm joking. I do.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Anthony, thanks a lot for joining us today. Been a pleasure as always. You can find out more about Macstaff on the website addressed at the bottom of the screen now. If you're watching us on YouTube today and you've not subscribed, please do so. And if you're looking to start a job search in the next couple of weeks, answer it in a book called Job Search, Job Done, which is well worth checking out. That just leaves me, Martin Crayson, to say thank you very much for joining us wherever you watched us today on YouTube or LinkedIn. If you've asked a question we've not got around to answering it, we'll endeavour to do so over the next couple of days in the comments section. Thanks for joining us here on Macstaff Live, and have a great day, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.